Hello everyone. This is going to be a bit different for my account, even though my account's pretty much brand new, still going to be different. I have a list of questions for myself that I'm going to answer to kind of solidify what this is going to be about. But yeah, let's just get right into it. I think these questions are going to set up everything nicely. First question, who am I? My name is David. I used to go by Days or Days Production, D-A-Y-Z. I was mainly a language account. You're gonna see most of this on YouTube, but I posted a lot on TikTok and Instagram, and I think all my stuff's on Facebook as well. But it was language centered. I would pick a word. Sometimes I would even do an idiom, and I would just break it down. I would do the etymology of the word, the history of it. I would do what the word means, where it came from, what other language it came from, how it defines into itself now, how it grew into what it was. So yeah, my entire online presence, besides doing a podcast, which I've done with a group called The Guys, which is no longer a thing anymore. It's just me now by myself. But that was kind of funny. It was called The Conscious Cast. And we would just, literally just like what I'm doing right here, is I would write down questions and everybody would answer them. But, as you can see, it's just me now. So, what do I wish to accomplish with this video? That's a really good question. My life, much like everybody's life, or eventually in everybody's life, is going through a lot of changes. Just a year ago, my life was completely different than it is right now. But one of the biggest differences in my life at this particular moment is, one, I'm returning to religion, particularly Christ, Jesus Christ, who I've been away from for a long time. I've had quite the bumpy road up to this point, because I'm 25 now, and I just stepped away from everything, even close to God, pretty much for 11 years. When I was 14, I would say, is when I started walking away from God. I just thought it was a sham. But what I want to accomplish with this video is, for everybody out there who is having a hard time finding what they believe in, who doesn't know where to go, who's maybe tried religion in the past and it didn't work out for them, maybe someone who is trying atheism out, or just, a way of life in general, somebody concerned with their beliefs, which I hope is everybody, but, it's not. Another reason is because, for the most part, I'm alone right now. I had a lot more friends just a year ago. Close friends that I saw on a daily basis. And now it's just me, which is fine. I think this is what it was supposed to be. I don't think it's a coincidence that as I'm returning to God, I am alone. I think that, I think biblically that makes a lot of sense. So let's go to the next question. What is my history and current relationship with Christ? Well, I kind of went into it. When I was 14, let's start from the beginning, I guess. I started learning about God very early, particularly the Christian God and Jesus Christ very early. I was probably from birth it had to have been. And I took it as seriously as I could have. It was very confusing to me. The Bible was a difficult read. I could not keep up. I could not understand what the Bible was getting at. The biggest depiction that everybody was trying to, hammer into me was Jesus, which was effective for the most part. I could imagine Jesus as a character, but the issue with that is that the image of Jesus in my mind and how I've carried him up until maybe 6 months to a year ago was not accurate. I thought Jesus was very docile. I thought Jesus was very passive, which, he is these things in certain contexts, in certain scenarios, but In other scenarios, he wasn't. Jesus was steadfast. Jesus was, borderline aggressive. There are some depictions of Jesus in the Bible that I never thought was the case, which is a big reason why I'm returning to him. But don't let me get ahead of myself. My history with Christ. So probably from like 5 to 14, give or take, because I don't remember. But for the most part, every single night I would pray before I went to bed. And, I'd make it relatively lengthy. I would make sure I hit everybody up there, dear God, Jesus, and angels. Like, I had to make sure they all got the message from me. But it was rooted in fear, and it was rooted in confusion. So my prayer was very, fragmented. My prayer was very timid, trembling. I was pretty much like, God, Jesus, I don't understand it all, but please don't let me burn in hell. That was the biggest thing. That was the one thing from the Bible and from Christ that I fully understood. There was no question of what is hell. There was no question. I knew one thing about hell, and it's that I didn't want to go there. And that was enough of a conviction to pray every night. But as I got older, 14 particularly, up until 14, it was just gradually moving towards this. I started, partaking in sin, conscious sin, pride, plenty of lust. The internet was just at our disposal. In high school, I had an iPad, for God's sake, which the first couple of years, they didn't have any internet restrictions on it. A bunch of 14-year-old boys and girls with the internet at their disposal, and technology is still relatively new. Still, even today it is, but at least I'm a generation that grew up with it, which was, I was technically one of the first generations to grow up with technology. So, I had my fun with that. I didn't exactly know what I was getting into, but, obviously a lot of sin. And I just hit a point when I was 14 where I said, I am terrified of hell, and I am absolutely horrified of eternal damnation, but I keep sinning, and I'm not going to the Bible because I think it's too complex for me. I think it's too much for me. So you know what? I'm not going to pray every night and then just dabble in sin willy-nilly every single day. I thought that was unfair. I thought that was hypocritical. I thought that was just insincere. So I stepped away from prayer, which was my first, step away from God, was stepping away from prayer. And, the complexity of the Bible didn't intimidate me as much, obviously, because I wasn't, in God's sight as much. So I was a little more dismissive of God. I was quiet at first. For a lot of years, I was just quiet. Because, I didn't want to be seen as a Christian nutcase. I didn't want to be the person standing up for Christ when no one else would, which, on one hand it's cowardly, but on another hand it's, I just didn't think I could stand the heat of standing up for Christ. I only prayed to him in fear, which I never was okay with that, if I'm being honest. I don't think I should only pray to God and Jesus from fear. I think it's at least one reason to, I guess, because prayer in itself is an admission of being a victim in some ways. You're putting it in God's hands. But, I went all the way in with that. I was like, I'm a complete trembling victim, which, in some Christian sense, that's true. But I did not want it to be the only final line that kept me showing up to the gates of heaven. I did not like that idea. I wanted more love, understanding, compassion, and peace in my prayer, in my understanding of God and the Bible. So I stepped away. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole 11 years, but let's just say I stepped further and further and further and further away from God. and a bunch of ultimatums hit me. You know, in your life, you're hit with these big decisions. As you go down the line of pride, as you go down the realm of lust and wrath, you know, you hit a very big boundary. You hit a very big decision. It's like, okay, if you choose to keep going down this path of wrath, if you choose to keep going down this path of lust, if you choose to keep going down this path of pride, you're going to become someone very different. You're going to, you know, you start seeing the initial signs as long as you remain aware, which, you know, a lot of people in sin, especially progressive sin that's only growing and snowballing, they don't really care much for staying aware in it because it's painful, which is why drunkenness and detachment and apathy are a very normal, what's the word I'm going for here? Endings, I guess, to playing with sin. So you hit a point with pride where it's like, okay, I'm viewing everyone as below me, or like people outside my herd I'm viewing as below me. Am I going to keep doing this? You go to a certain line with lust, and it's like, okay, I'm disgusting myself in my lust, or I'm hurting others in my lust, or I'm objectifying people in my lust. Am I going to keep going? And then wrath can become physical violence. Wrath can become hating everybody. Wrath will lead you eventually to, you know, I mean, all the sins eventually are going to lead you to a very scary place. And eventually you're going to be confronted with an ultimatum, a decision. Are you going to keep going, or are you going to turn back? And I went pretty far before I decided to turn back. I wasn't wearing it on my sleeve. I was somewhere in the gray area with, do I want to turn completely away from God, or do I want to turn back from God? I was in a big gray area bubble. I was in a lot of playing dumb. I was in a lot of, if I don't learn about the Bible and I don't learn about Jesus, I'm not going to be as held as accountable, so I can keep going and it's okay, but eventually one day I can turn back, and it's like, that's all cope, that's all denial. So, essentially, I guess what I'm getting at right now is I turned back to Christ. I mean, I thought he was a sham. I thought he was a joke. I thought there was no way that you could believe in a all-knowing, all-loving God. I thought that was a joke. I mean, I was like, look around you for 5 seconds and tell yourself that the God you believe in is all-loving. It's just, I don't understand how that's possible. But, you know, I've changed my mind on a lot of things. I'm reading the Bible in a way that I never have, in a way that I never thought I could have. I'm interpreting Jesus and his teachings in a way that I thought I never could. It's making a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I'm back on the Jesus train. Why did I return to Christ? If I'm being dead honest, a huge reason that I returned to Christ is because of Cliff Knechtle and his son Stuart Knechtle. They are pastors. Cliff in particular, because he's been going to college campuses for 4.5 decades. You know, I think he's 70 years old. So he started when he was 25. And he was going to college campuses and debating. He would debate professors, and he's still doing this today. With his son now, Stuart, he'll debate professors, he'll debate students, he'll about the legitimacy of the Bible, about legitimacy of Christ, about and you know, he pinpointed something really important for me that I don't think I ever learned growing up, and that was, don't start with Genesis, don't start at the beginning of the Bible and try to digest this whole humongous library of books, because that's what the Bible is. It's not just one book, it's a library, it's a compilation of books, of texts over many, many years. Cliff doesn't say to start there. Cliff says to start at the Gospels with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because if you start with them, you get to see eyewitness testimony of people watching Christ in the flesh, how he lived, what he said, the way he treated people, what he taught. And that's a very different place to start in the Bible, because he's not emphasizing all the canon of the Bible and King David and Adam and Eve and the serpent in the Garden of Eden on the tree of knowledge. He's saying to start with, you know, Son of Man, Son of God, the man who, you know, supposedly, or it's said that he rose from the dead, that he cured the blind, cured the sick, he walked on water, he turned water to wine. It's like, who was this man? What did this man do? What did this man say? Why is he so important? Even today, 2,000 years after he lived, why is he still talked about? Why do people still fight for this man? Why do people wear cross necklaces on... I saw, just at work today, I saw several cross necklaces. It's like the cross is everywhere. The cross is in my house. It's like, I didn't even put it there. It's just, the cross is a symbol that follows us. Why is it so huge? Why is the crucifixion so enormous? And I'll eventually get into that. I don't know if it'll be in this episode per se, but that's why I returned to Christ. I returned to Christ because I sincerely, legitimately was like, who is this man? Who was Jesus Christ? What did he say? How did he live? What did he teach? And what did he abide by in himself? What was his character like? You know, these questions are very important because that's how you get the gist of anybody that you learn about. If you look at any celebrity today, how do you judge their character? Well, you know, you can only go off of, you know, public display and record of these people, but what did they say? What are the results of what they said? How did they live their life? What did they say they believed in versus how did they act in accordance to what they believed in? You know, these are important questions in discerning someone's life. And you can do the same with someone that lived 2,000 years ago who supposedly performed all of these, you know, miraculous deeds for others. And, you know, he himself is just a supernatural being, or at least said to be. So, yeah, that's why I returned to Christ, because I'm understanding his legitimacy more. I'm understanding his words more. I'm understanding the impact that he has on the world today and in the past much more than I ever have. And that's why I'm returning to Christ now. What do I know about the Bible? To be honest with you, not very much. I do not know very much about the Bible. I'm learning more about King David. I'm learning more about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. To be honest with you, I don't know how much I think of this as historical legitimacy versus fairy tale or symbolic storytelling. I have not fleshed out exactly what I think is real in the Bible and what I don't. I don't know who wrote everything in the Bible, or who wrote Romans, who wrote Psalms. I think King David wrote all the Psalms, but to be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know everything about King David's life. I don't know everything about Moses. Honestly, I don't know very much about Moses at all. So there's a lot in the Bible that's blurry for me at the moment. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Why do I trust? This is two questions in one. Why do I trust Jesus, and what does it mean to trust Jesus? Why do I trust Jesus? I trust Jesus because from the things I've read about him, he is convincing and worthy of trust. What do I mean by that? Well, was Jesus guilty and deserving of dying on the cross? From the story, no, he wasn't. Jesus was an innocent man. Jesus spoke ill of the Pharisees and other religious leaders. He did this, from his own perspective. He was saying this was due to their hypocrisy and the fact that they were leading them astray down towards, a hellish path, a path that will lead them to eternal damnation. So he cursed them, and pretty much, he cursed at them, I guess. He said some pretty horrendous things towards them. That took a lot of bravery on Jesus' part. Jesus ate with sinners. Jesus ate with broken people. Jesus ate with prostitutes and tax collectors. Jesus came with a towel. Jesus spoke of forgiveness and mercy. Jesus was the ultimate paradox. He spoke of hell more than heaven in the Bible, apparently. And yet he came as the truth and the life. He was light in himself, yet spoke of the devil and hell and torture. And it's like, how do you have this character who's both lion and the lamb? How do you have someone peaceful and powerful? How do you have someone that's I don't know, he's just a, you can't quite pin down what his figure is. He's everywhere and nowhere at once. And what, I mean that in the sense of, he was transparent, but he wasn't. I mean, he was standing for the truth. He said he was speaking from and for his Father, and yet he would say things that confused people. It's like, who is this? You speak for the Father, but no one knows exactly what you're getting at. Why are you eating with the sinners and washing their feet and cursing the people at the top who are the religious occult? It was very confusing. It's like, who is this man? So I trust Jesus because I believe that he never claimed to be something that he wasn't. I think he's sincere. That's a big reason I trust Jesus. Another reason I trust Jesus is because he sought to be the light for the broken people, the people who thought they were below society, the people who thought that they were worthless. He was offering a light to them. The people who were just diminished by life. They thought that they were less than. They thought, in the grand scheme of life and the hierarchies, they were not fitting the bill. And Jesus came to remind them, there is no bill in my world. The Father sees everyone on an equal playing field. No one is above anyone. So, he came as a light. He came as a refuge. He came as a savior. And he claimed to be that. He claimed to give people salvation. So I think he's congruent despite his paradoxes. I think he's misunderstood, which is a big reason why his paradoxes, people use that to dismiss Jesus. I think that's a reason that validates him. I don't think he's ever claimed to be something he wasn't. And then I think by dying on the cross the way that he did in his innocence proves that. I think he was fully man. I think he, despite walking on water, it's like, how are you fully man, but you have these supernatural gifts? It's like, okay, he was the prophet among prophets, the King of Kings. But, the Father determined for him that he was going to die on the cross. Whether Jesus wanted to do that or not was irrelevant, and he knew that. And I think that's another part of Jesus that's convincing. I don't think he was here and preaching the word and doing all of these miraculous things for himself. I don't think there was any selfish intent from Jesus. I don't think he had a selfish bone in his body. So he's sincere. He's selfless. He's not selfish. And he was willing to die for the truth, or what he was saying was the truth. And I think these are three of the biggest reasons why I personally trust in Christ and his credibility. And what does it mean to trust Jesus? To trust Jesus, in his words apparently, is to pick up your cross and follow him. Not to live for yourself, but to live for and through him. So that means, in a psychological, egoic sense, is to kill yourself. You are to be born again. If you begin following Jesus, you are to be born again. That's the idea of being baptized. You're washing away your sins to be born again. And Jesus is a high bar. Jesus asks for perfection, even though he knows that you could never be perfect. That's another part of his paradox. He asks you to be merciful and forgiving, but also discerning. He asks you to see evil, to step in the line of fire of evil. He doesn't want you to kill yourself per se, but he wants you to think about how he reacted to the Pharisees, the hypocrisy, the leaders leading, the people to hell rather than to heaven. How against them he was. If you're following Jesus, you're going to be against them as well. You're going to stand in the light and be crucified, maybe not literally, hopefully not literally, but, sacrifice yourself in the name of truth, in the name of the Father. It's a high bar to follow Jesus. Jesus asks a lot of you, but Yeah, that's my interpretation. Why should someone follow Jesus is the next question. Well, you got my three. I think Jesus was sincere. I think his character is convincing. I think he's selfless. I think he died for what he believed in. I don't think he was doing it for himself. I think he was doing it for mankind. I think he was doing it for everybody else. He was trying to be an example. He was trying to be heard through eternity. He was trying to do something, that wasn't going to go anywhere. Even though it was 2,000 years ago, it still remains, at least for the most part. I mean, maybe some parts of what he was is fragmented. Maybe we've lost. I mean, the man lived for 30-odd some years. There's no way that we have every word he ever spoke. Hardly. But something about him lives on. Something about him that has remained. There's a depiction in our minds of who Jesus is. Everyone. We say Jesus Christ when, something is absurd or ridiculous. Like, oh, Jesus Christ. It's like, his name's not going anywhere. The cross is everywhere. It's like, why are there so many symbols following this man? Why are there so many words in his name? Why is he directly tied to what is beyond the material? So why should someone follow Jesus? I don't think you should just follow Jesus because he's this famous guy. I don't think you should just follow Jesus because everybody said he died on a cross for our sins and you should just take their word for it. I think you should follow Jesus because of the character that is depicted that he represents. I believe that Jesus lived. A lot of people don't. I think that you should go look for yourself. I think you should go read the Gospels yourself and, use your own mind and use your own inquiry to figure out for yourself what you believe in. But if you come to the ground level that, yes, I believe Jesus existed and I think the character that he represented is accurate, it is very difficult, in my opinion, to not follow that. I think the man that Jesus is and what he represents is incredibly convincing. I think his wisdom is second to none. I think his embodiment of what he believed in is second to none. I think the things that he said and the things that he did are novel and irreplicable. Sinless life. How do you beat that? And people want to, me for instance, in the past, I would hold that against Jesus. Oh, it's a sinless life. Why would I follow someone that I can't replicate? Why should I give my inspiration to a bar that I could never hit? Why would I do that? That's ridiculous. But that's somewhat the point of Jesus. The point of Jesus is he's showing you the bar. He's showing you, he's just giving you a good example. A perfect example, really, but a good example. Jesus' story, Jesus' character, Jesus' person is trying to portray not only what humanity now don't hit and don't understand, but even Adam in the Garden of Eden didn't understand. Because Adam ate from the tree of knowledge, and even though Eve did it first, he was blamed as the person who caused the first sin. And it's like, why is that? People have theories. My theory is that Eve was being blasphemous before she ate from the tree, but Adam didn't say anything because he was scared that if he told God, God would take Eve away from Adam. So Adam chose the material, the companionship over God. And I guess the example I'm trying to make here with comparing Adam to Jesus is Jesus, apparently died a virgin. He never slept with anybody. He did not choose the material over God ever. He did not choose companionship over God. In fact, he went to be alone a lot of the time to pray with God. So he would choose God regularly over people, over food, that's why he fasted in the desert for 40 days. He was siding with immaterial over material, which is, the perfect example of abiding by God's command and following in the path that Jesus set out. So why should someone follow Jesus? Because Jesus lived a perfect life, because Jesus has tremendous teachings, because I believe, and most people believe, especially if you believe in his miracles, because you have to, that he had something beyond what human faculties can provide. So Jesus was more than a man, but also a man at the same time. Jesus is reliable in his teachings and what he requests of you, even though the thing that he requests, or the things that he requests, is an impossible standard, really. What are some things that Jesus said, and what is my interpretation of these quotes? Okay, so I have some quotes here. I have some of my favorite quotes by Jesus. And this will, reveal some of the teachings of Jesus, some of the things he had to say, some of the wisdom of Jesus. So, but many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. Paradox. We open this with Jesus as a paradox. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. What does this mean? Well, think about it, the things that we've said up to this point. Jesus ate with and talked about forgiveness to sinners, to prostitutes and tax collectors and people who were cast out from society, people who were seen as less than, broken people who didn't want to be seen in public. Jesus came to them offering forgiveness. Jesus came to them, and in a society standard, they would be seen as last. They would be seen as, outside the kingdom. People who have to eat the scraps, people who have to dig through the rummage to get by. These are the people that Jesus sat with. These are the people that Jesus ate with, washed their feet, cured them. These people were last by the material standards, by the human standards, by the ego standards. The things that we, with our eyes in this world, people with gold and silver and jewels, that's seen as first. Someone that's a king, someone that's in command, who has authority, who says, you're going to listen to me. That's first place in the human standard. Jesus comes and says, no, it's the opposite. Jesus says the broken, the ones who don't understand, the ones who are hurting and paying dearly every day, those are the ones who will be first in the kingdom of heaven, even though they're sinners. But at least they admit themselves as sinners. They are broken and see themselves as broken. They are poor and see themselves as poor. They are, they see themselves as children. And that would be last in the human sense. Because a father and a mother raise a child, not the opposite. So on paper, the adults are first and children are last. But even in that context, children are to go to heaven no matter what, apparently. Don't quote me on that. Still got to do my Bible study. And then the Pharisees, on paper, they're first. The religious leaders, they're first. They're in charge. They have all the money. They have all the power. They have everything, in the human condition, first place. Jesus says, no, you're a hypocrite. You lead all these people astray. You're, he treated them like they were last. He gave them the worst of himself. And, technically there is no worst in Jesus and a sin factor, but worst as in, the most assertive, aggressive version of Jesus, the side of Jesus that was like, no, this is wrong, don't do this. He saved that for the people who were supposedly first, the people at the top. And, that's part of the appeal with Jesus, because he's kind of reminding everybody that we're on an equal playing field, but it's also a huge paradox of Jesus. So that's one of my favorite quotes by Jesus. The second, you will know them by their fruits. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit. A bad tree cannot bear good fruit. I've been trying to understand this quote, since walking back to Jesus, because it's kind of tricky. It's kind of layered. It's kind of, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit. A bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Okay, so in that line of discourse, he's saying, or just in the quote, he's saying human beings are either bad trees or good trees. It's like, okay, but we can also be reborn, so that means that if you're a bad tree, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be a bad tree. So I guess that would also mean that if you're a good tree, you're not only and always going to be a good tree. Okay. And then he says fruits. You will know them by their fruits. What does that mean? Okay, let's say someone's character is a good tree or a bad tree. let's say they're a bad tree, a bad character, but they try to act and put on the front of being a good character. Because I think this is what Jesus is getting at with this quote. He's trying to help people with their discernment, their moral discernment of what's actually happening. When a bad person talks about how good of a person they are, and going out of their way to talk about how good of a person they are, look at their life, look at what's actually coming from them on a daily basis, look at their habits, look at how people respond to them, look at what they do, what's important to them, what they refuse to do. Look at their character at the grounds level. Look at, what they prioritize and why. Like, maybe someone that's talking about how good of a person they are all the time is, feeding into pride and feeding into hiding themselves and lying. But you'll see it when, someone tries to take theirs. If they're given an opportunity to give something to someone that's theirs, this is, obviously it's dependent, but you're given a pocket into their mind. You're able to see, what will this person do with someone in need? Will they help them? And then, okay, maybe that one time they do help them because everybody's watching. But what about on a more personal level? What if when everybody's not in the room, they feel more selfish? They feel less of a reason to give. It's like, oh, okay, so are you giving just so that way people can see you giving? Oh, okay. Bad fruit. It's like, okay, you want to make it seem like you have good fruit, but then at the same time, that's also bad fruit because you're only doing it for the crowd appeal. So even now, that's bad fruit. That one's still tricky for me. I'm still learning that one, but that's something I'm learning. And then lastly, love your neighbor as yourself. Now this is part of the wisdom with Jesus. This is part of the convincingness of Jesus that I'm talking about. When Jesus went to the Pharisees, he's telling them to love your neighbor, love everybody else as yourself. Don't lie to them. Don't lead them astray. Don't be a hypocrite, because you wouldn't want someone to be a hypocrite to you. And then, in a strange way, he's doing the same thing with the prostitutes and with the tax collectors. He's saying, love your neighbor as yourself in that context. He's like raising them up. And it's ironic too, because usually people that have gone through great suffering are the most gentle with other people. That's not always the case, but it seems to be the case for some people. But love your neighbor as yourself is a very insightful, convincing, grounds level quote. Everybody's equal. No king should show wrath on someone that's unworthy of wrath. No one should put someone to the side so that way they look better, because I doubt that they would want someone to put someone to the side so that way they could look better. It's like placing yourself in other people's shoes. It's like, where do you think that quote comes from? I imagine it comes from Jesus and what Jesus had to say. But, those are all the questions I had for myself. I didn't know how this was going to go. I don't even know what to title this, really. It's very, I haven't called myself a Christian yet. I don't even think I've used the word Christian this entire video. But, that coincides with what I was saying about Cliff Knechtle. He was saying that you should look at Christ's life rather than the Bible or church. So, Christianity is not what I'm so much concerned with at the moment, because I'm pretty new to all this, as you can probably tell. I think Christ is the crux. Christ is the crux of the Bible. Christ is the inevitable, indisputable main facet of the Bible. That's why I guess my consensus for this is that's why I think Jesus is convincing. Where I'm coming from in all of this, and I guess my trajectory and where I'm headed. But let me know what you think about this, because this was pretty off the dome. I didn't really know where this was going to go. I didn't know where I first video was gonna go, but here it is. Thank you.